George Kilpatrick, Inspiration for the Nation, celebrating people we feel good about. Peter Dunn has been at the helm of the Central New York Community Foundation for 15 years. Well, this week he said goodbye. Well, Central New York said goodbye to him. He didn't say goodbye yet, but this week Central New York said goodbye to Peter, and he joins us now to talk about his next adventure, which is to be the CEO of the Community Foundation of, let's say it together, Peter, Worcester.
Worcester.
Worcester,
Yeah.
Massachusetts. And so, Peter, great to see you. Peter, I'm very familiar, obviously, with the work that you do with the Central New York Community Foundation. We've partnered over the years on various projects and events. I've helped out. You've been in support of the work that we do here. And of course, CNY Community Foundation, a partner of Inspiration for the Nation. Having said that, how do you encapsulate the 15 years of the work that you've done at the Central New York Community Foundation?
So I think that if I'm to reflect on where we were and where we are, I think for the foundation itself, I think there's a story of growth, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you were to just look at our metrics, the foundation has quadrupled in size from 100 million to 400 million in assets. We now make about 20 million a year in grants. We activate significant contributions from donors for the benefit of the region. And I think we've also grown significantly in terms of our reputation and work in the community, specifically around some specific leadership efforts, things like our lead poisoning work, our Black Equity and Excellence work, all the support that we provided to bring Say Yes and the scholarship program along. I think those kinds of signature things we've become more identified with as a civic leader in helping to move the community forward, in addition to creating more charitable resources for the benefit of the community. I think that we've become both more well-known, more impactful, and more entrenched and engaged in community during that time. I think the city itself and the region has shifted. When I came here in 2008, there definitely was I don't know if I want to call it a malaise, but there definitely was a lot of both skepticism and negativity that's sort of endemic to Central New York and Syracuse, just because the community's been through a lot of trauma through the years.
Sure.
I think things are starting to shift. And while it's starting to shift in a positive direction, like we've seen a bunch of other peer communities, there's also a lot to do on our plate. And, things that we do need to prioritize on a go-forward basis in the community. And we can certainly talk about those.
Yeah, I would love to talk about some of those things. And I'm thinking maybe even for the audience to remind them what the role of the Community Foundation is in our community, and then what you wanted to do with your version of what that role is.
Yeah, so the Community Foundation is like the community savings account, the charitable savings account. So we are not one foundation, we're actually 900. The Community Foundation is composed of 900 different named charitable funds that do a whole bunch of different things. And I mentioned those numbers a moment ago. That's the collective value of the foundation. We're the largest philanthropic resource in the region. And we do really two big things. On the one hand, we work with people who love this community, who want to support it through charitable contributions for the benefit of the community, a lot of times through their estates, or we have been known to receive bequests from lots and lots of individuals through the years. So people do their estate plans and think of us as the place where their financial resource for the community is going to live on. And we help people during their lifetimes grow their philanthropy for the benefit of the community. So we're about activating and growing philanthropic resources on a permanent basis, endowment for the community. And then the other side is we really work to help make change in the community. And that happens on three levels. There's community change, like the lead poisoning work that we're trying to do. There's nonprofit organizational change, where we make grants to a whole bunch of nonprofit organizations to help them with projects and needs and capital things that they want to do, really to help organizations strengthen and get better at doing whatever their mission is. And then on an individual basis, we're the largest scholarship provider in the region through our Say Yes program and other things that we do. So we are both about growing philanthropy and helping create better conditions and move our community forward.
You know, when Say Yes first, there's a couple of things I want to talk about. When Say Yes was first created, was not inside the community foundation, and at some point, there was a conversation, obviously, in the community, and you brought the team over, Amit Turner, for example, into the under the umbrella of the community foundation. Why was that important for the sustainability of that program, and how did that happen?
So if you think back to Say Yes, it started about 14 years ago, and it was a collaboration between a national nonprofit, Say Yes, in New York City, and local anchor institutions like Syracuse University, the county, the city schools, Onondaga County, and Onondaga Community College, lots of partners. And that partnership has been really resilient, but as the national organization stepped back to focus on other communities and ultimately wound up its affairs, there was a void that needed to be filled. We had always been positioned as kind of the bank for Say Yes, as where the money lived. There was what is now a $30 million endowment that was raised for the benefit of city kids for the scholarship, and we're the home of that. So it was a natural step when the national organization decided to wind up its affairs for us to step in, for Amit and his colleague to become part of our team. Amit now oversees all of our scholarship programs. So it was a really good synergistic opportunity. And we were so identified with Say Yes financially, it made sense for us to become the programmatic home of it. And it's one of the signature things I'd say I'm most proud of, because, George, if you were to go back to 2008 and you were to ask somebody, hey, what do you think it would take to create a $30 million fund for city kids for scholarships? People would think you were crazy.
Right.
And today we have permanent resources that are there to help support kids who have a dream of going to college. And every year, hundreds and hundreds of kids are supported in that way. And so I'm proud of that. It was very complicated and a lot of different moving parts, but it was a good space for the Community Foundation to be in.
You talk about a good space for the Community Foundation to be in. Obviously, the creation of the Black Equity and Excellence Fund for Black-owned companies. For some people, that could be considered controversial. You and the Community Foundation stepped in to not only do that work, but also to continue that work. Talk to me about that.
So many different levels to that, right? We had been on a journey institutionally for a couple of years preceding the murder of George Floyd. We had been doing a variety of work, really taking an equity lens and looking at our, different types of systemic bias and how does that reflected in our work internally, externally, and so forth. And so after the whole the murder of George Floyd, we wanted to really put a stake in the ground and be more specific. We'd always had equity as a priority, but not so publicly. We were kind of quiet about it. And so we made $1 million commitment to organizations that are led by and governed by the Black community, nonprofit organizations and projects and their partners. And we committed to doing $1 million in grants over a 4+ year period. And for us, we've learned so much, right? Number one, we've had incredible staff who've really helped lead the effort. We've had an incredible advisory council who've helped govern the process and pick the projects that are funded. We've learned so much about applications. And one of my things that I've really focused in on is new relationships. If you were to look at the first 2 grant rounds, we had maybe 70 applications in those first 2 grant rounds a couple of years ago. 2/3 of those projects and organizations had never applied to us before. So that told me that, we're this large, perhaps sometimes intimidating philanthropic institution. And the process that we used, which really boiled down the application, made it less narrative heavy, had alternate vehicles for application, like using PowerPoint or video. We really demystified the process, and that resulted in all these new applications from organizations that had never come to us before, which said to me that that's the kind of change that I was hoping to see. those kinds of new relationships. Now, obviously, they all didn't get funded, right? But they started a relationship with us that can lead to future funding through the Black Equity Fund, as well as the other funding streams that we manage, because we manage significant work. One of the organizations that got funded was the doulas.
Yeah.
You're familiar with the doulas, and they were funded, I think, in the first round of the Black Equity Fund, and they were very much involved in our community engagement work recently through the lead program. We had a whole, the community voted on different opportunities for funding within the lead space, and they were a part of the team that won that $150,000 grant. So that's an example of, from no relationship to now we have a multi-level different relationship with that one organization. So I'm really proud of that, right? Because I think when we started it, there was probably some initial skepticism. Here's this big fancy downtown foundation wants to do this work. When we had money out in the community within 3 months of announcement, and ever since annually, we've been making grants. I'm really proud of it.
The other thing that you do is obviously you hold funds for nonprofit organizations.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about the scholarship, I know our fraternity keeps a fund there, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, and so you also are. Is it the right word, a placeholder or a space? Explain that, because I know that that's also a vehicle for building relationships with folks.
So we are about building permanent resources, right? So that means endowment. And an endowment means that you're investing for the long term and you're spending a disciplined amount every year, like 4 or 5%. That's your grant budget. So we are about creating permanent resources. In some ways, if you were to think of it, the United Way is like the community checking account, money in, money out. It's like an annual campaign for human services. We are the community savings account for all sorts of different charitable purposes that donors have defined. And sometimes that's an individual donor who wants to leave a legacy, who may have been fortunate and been really disciplined during their career and have resources that they love the community and they want to use those resources for a purpose that we help work with them to define. And then there are organizations like your fraternity that you mentioned. We have multiple historically Black African-American sororities and fraternities who have scholarship funds with us, and we manage the funds for them, and they define the scholarship recipients typically. Sometimes the funds are for a variety of different purposes, but that's an example where we're kind of the community bank for those types of funds. We do all the management, all the investments, make sure the funds are used in an appropriate way. But we work with so many different people who have interests that they want to help support.
I'm talking with Peter Dunn, CEO of the Central New York Community Foundation. This is his going away farewell conversation, although he's going to stick around until they find a new CEO. And will you be involved in that process at all, other than just to manage until that person is selected?
So I'm going to stay here through the end of June, and then I start in Worcester, Massachusetts in August. We'll have an interim CEO that'll start in July. One of our vice presidents, Tom Griffith, will be our interim CEO.
Sure.
Yeah, and then we have a search committee that's been put together. We have a national search firm that'll be advising the committee and the board, and I'd project that process will work its way through into the fall, probably when the next person will be named.
Couple of issues. Poverty obviously has been a big concern of our community. That's one thing. I'm also thinking about the work that you've done with other organizations, especially grassroots organizations. I really, that's part of the work that I helped out with Beth and Hassan Stevens over the years. But let's go back to the eradication or the high poverty levels. And your part, this community foundation was part of, obviously, not just you dealing with that issue, but as a community, we really are still we haven't fixed. I don't want to say fix it, but the like where are we with the trying to eradicate poverty in our community?
Yeah, it's really hard. The data doesn't lie. We have the highest incidence of child poverty for large cities in the country. We have a study was done some years ago that showed that we had the highest concentrated poverty for Black and Latino populations in the country. So that doesn't mean we're the poorest city, but it's very concentrated. If you look at Syracuse, the decision about where to put highways, hills and valleys, people's residential patterns, redlining back to the 30s, lots of reasons why that is the way it is. And it is structurally an enormous challenge, right? Fundamentally, people need to make more. So economic development is profoundly important. You need to raise wage and salary levels over time. And excuse me, as a foundation, we look for opportunities and we look to pick a lane where we think we can make a difference. Because you're talking about something that is so enormous, right? And what philanthropy can do is not what government can do, right? We can do things, we can experiment, we can help create new opportunities that then government might take up. But the scale of government resources far exceeds anything that the philanthropy can do. So that the lead poisoning is a good example of something that we decided to get active in because we had been active in for decades in literacy issues. And we had a real strong interest in early childhood literacy. We helped bring the Dolly Parton Imagination Library books that kids from birth to age 5 get every year across the county. We helped bring that here. We help Say Yes, right? So both, if you think about early childhood and then matriculation to college, so both ends of that. But then, one of the things that we learned over time is the impact of where people live on those issues, on academic achievement, workforce development, ability to move to higher education. Where you live matters. And housing is health and health is housing, right? And one of the challenges in Syracuse has been that in a lot of cases, housing that affordable is not accessible. And on the flip side, housing that is healthy is not affordable, right? So what do you do with that? And you've got this crisis where parts of the south side of Syracuse, 25% of the kids who are tested have elevated lead levels.
Right.
So the data is out there. The data doesn't lie. And the data has been profoundly motivating for us and others. And what we have done is we made a multi-million-dollar commitment around this issue. We've been able to do some things that I think the county and the city, while they are, profoundly supportive of what we're doing, we can do things quicker and differently than they can, and also inspire them in new ways. So we've helped residents get more engaged and more active around the issue. We've helped organizations like Home Headquarters to, really beef up their windows and doors. Lead comes from paint that's sloughed off from windows, friction surfaces like windows and doors. That's where a lot of the problems come from in older housing and hasn't been kept up. So we have a program to work with Home Headquarters to provide those resources, to work with landlords and property owners to create more safety in more units. And we've helped, hundreds of units through over the time that we've been engaged. But that's, so this is an example of a lane that as a philanthropic organization that we think there's an environmental justice issue, a racial justice issue, and a social justice issue all wrapped into one. And that, if we're active in this space, we can help improve those conditions to get to the poverty issue that you were referencing, right? There are a lot of different ways you can go at it, whether you want to focus on the workforce and jobs and things of that nature, or economic development. We found this as an opportunity that it's a precondition that undermines so many other things that we care about.
The other thing is, what's the work that you feel is undone, or that if you had more time, or if you weren't going to Worcester, you would then focus on this for the next, or what's the one thing you're going to hand over to the next CEO that you think is a real critical issue for our community?
I think we're at an inflection point as a community. And it will be fascinating to see in 10 years, the effect of the Micron investment, so many other
Right.
companies that will follow Micron, not just
Right.
Micron. But we're going to have growth. And that growth is something that I think people in central New York are not conditioned for. They're used for
Mm.
companies leaving. We're used to, remembering when Carrier had 10,000 employees. They're not conditioned for, we're talking about more than 100,000 people moving here, right? And so that growth is going to result in a lot of challenges, particularly around issues of housing. How everyone in the community can access the opportunities that will be that'll come from all this change and growth. In Micron, we have a company that has been exemplary in its community outreach. I think that's outstanding for us that we have a company that is that engaged. But over time, community is going to change. I don't know if everybody's ready for it.
Mm.
When I look at Worcester, so Worcester had a lot of commonalities with Syracuse. It's Worcester slightly larger than Syracuse,
Right.
but it's booming economically. It has the effect of Boston.
I was gonna say Boston
No?
is like a little bit down the road there.
Yeah, it's like 50 miles down the road. And so
Yeah.
Boston can't move east, it can only move west. And so there's a tremendous amount of economic growth happening. And you don't see vacant houses in Worcester. You don't see empty property. You don't see the kind of conditions in some of our urban neighborhoods that you have here. That's a result of economic dislocation for decades. There you don't have it. Land's too valuable. Their issue is overcrowding. You have
Right.
too many people in too few spaces. Housing's a real crisis. I wonder, I think that there's starting to be a lot of conversation about housing here across all the different opportunities, whether it's in the suburbs, in the city, and so forth. I think that I'm not sure what the community foundation role can be in that on a go forward basis, but I think that if you think about the impact of where people live on all those different indicators that we talked about, I think it'll be profoundly important going forward.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because, like you said, how do I guess it begs the question: how do we get ready? How do we get ready?
There's so many people who have a lot of goodwill, right, to make this be done right. And I'm encouraged by the level of engagement, whether it's the city, the county, Center State CEO, businesses. We have such a bifurcated, a structure that, with all these towns and villages and all that, it's hard to get, movement in a collective way. However, I think the opportunity for us is such that I think folks understand that they need to get it right, right? And I heard it over and over, a commitment to engaging people across the community. It's not just a north, it's a thing in Clay, right? It's going to impact very broadly.
Finally, Peter, what will be the 1, 2, or 3 things you're going to miss about your adopted hometown of Syracuse and Central New York? And we should say that the Community Foundation impact is beyond Syracuse; it's around the region. So, what are you going to miss the most? I know you're going to say the people. Okay, beyond the people, what else are you going to miss?
I grew up in Buffalo, and so upstate New York is part of me, right? My wife went to college here. And so being here has been a great gift for us. And I love my 10-minute commute. I came from Los Angeles where it wasn't that.
And it's not that.
No.
No matter what time of day.
You could be 3 o'clock in the morning and there could be a thing, right?
My
And
son
so,
lives out there, and so we've experienced all of what you just said.
yeah, I mean, it all depends on how you organize your life in Los Angeles. And we were fortunate to have relatively reasonable commutes, but I've lived in places like Washington, D.C. and Los Angeles that are crazy, right? And so there's a certain quality of life here that is profoundly wonderful. I'm going to a place that's in fundamentally really part of the Boston metroplex. And
Mhm.
so it's a little bit different there. It's a more expensive existence. Lots of things, everything's twice as expensive. And so there is a wonderful quality of life here that I think people more and more are appreciating. And I'm going to miss Syracuse in that way. And then I'm also going to just miss seeing what happens next, because I think Syracuse's best days are ahead. And it really will rely on folks to be engaged for it to happen well.
And I guess we should officially thank you for your contribution to helping to make this community what it is and continue to be. And I know the work that you've done is certainly going to be a part of that legacy. So congratulations, Peter, on what you have ahead of you. And certainly the community of Syracuse, New York is made better because of your presence over these last 15 years.
Thank you so much, George.
All right. Peter Dunn, the CEO and president of the Central New York Community Foundation, soon to be president and CEO of the Community Foundation. What's the official title over there?
The Greater Worcester Community Foundation.
The Greater Worcester Community Foundation. And your allegiance will still be to the Yankees, I assume, or what are we going to do?
Oh, I had this conversation with them because I said, I grew up in Buffalo, I'm a Sabres and Bills fan. We don't like, Bill Belichick is like the devil in upstate New York. So
exactly.
I was told, they were very curious about my allegiance to the Yankees, which I do not have. I come from a Mets family.
Oh, you're a Mets family. Okay.
Yeah. So they were fine with that because the Boston Red Sox AAA team, the Woo Sox, is in Worcester. And so they're okay with me. I just need to be mindful about the swag that I wear and when I wear it. So.
Good enough. Well, Peter, good luck to you. And from all of us here at Inspiration for the Nation, we wish you luck.
Thank you so much, George.
Inspiration for the Nation.